Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is Naked Lunch. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of the Naked Lunch with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself, if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. Naked Lunch is a 1959 novel written by William S. Burroughs, who was one of the principal figures of the Beat generation. Beats were a group of post-war writers who experienced with drugs and religion, basically your pre-hippies. Burroughs himself was a rich playboy, Harvard graduate, drug addict, and enthusiastic homosexual with a talent for writing. He also traveled extensively and lived in many places, such as London, Paris, Tangier, and Mexico City, where he killed his wife with a pistol, which, according to him, was an accident. Throughout writing, Burroughs shows his remarkable intelligence and great amount of knowledge about a variety of subjects and a very keen sense of observation. Naked Lunch, together with The Tropic of Cancer, was part of the Supreme Court's obscenity cases in the 1960s, which practically put an end to the censorship of books in America. What is Naked Lunch about? It is about seeing the world through the eyes of a drug user, a grotesque tale of drug addiction and a collection of unconnected rants by a junkie about addiction, sexuality, travel, science, etc., 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 while moving between some real and some not so real places. I think the following quote sums up pretty well Burroughs' style and writing approach. There is only one thing a writer can write about: what is in front of his senses at the moment of writing. I am a recording instrument. I do not presume to impose story, plot, continuity. Insofar as I succeed in direct recording of certain areas of psychic process, I may have limited function. I am not an entertainer. So that's Burroughs' own take on Naked Lunch, which is not much clearer than the book itself. A bit of the plot. Well, the plot is a somewhat plotless journey through a mix of real and imaginary places by William Lee, who is the narrator and seems to be Burroughs' alter ego. The story starts in New York, where Lee is pursued by the police for his involvement with heroin, and as he is running away, he encounters many junkies and describes their plight and degeneration caused by the drug use. Because of the mounting pressure by the police, Lee decides to leave New York and goes on a road trip, passing through Philadelphia, Chicago, St. Louis, Houston, New Orleans, and ending in Mexico City, where he begins to experience with cocaine and marijuana. From this point, he moves into a fictional realm of his journey, and the first place he visits is called Freeland, which seems to be some kind of socialist Islamic republic, probably inspired by Burroughs' experiences in Tangier. There he runs into Dr. Benway from Islam Inc., who experiments with drug addicts and homosexuals. Next, the plot becomes a blur going back and forward between different dimensions of imaginary reality called Interzone, where Lee runs into a variety of individuals, some from his past and others imaginary, such as alien-like creatures called mugwumps. Finally, Lee seems to get back to the real world of New York, where he is still pursued by the police, and that's the basic plot of the book. What do I think about Naked Lunch? I don't really know what to think about it. It is a confusing tale of violent and pornographic hallucinations and illusions brought on by drug abuse. The book seems a science fiction novel and a bit of a travel book, where the narrator moves through some real and some not so real places, and according to Burroughs himself, the chapters can be read in any order. He writes, "You can cut into Naked Lunch at any intersection point." The book is somewhat easy to read but difficult to understand, therefore difficult to review. It might be because I was never a drug addict and I might not be able to relate to some parts of the journey. Quoting Burroughs, "You were not there for the beginning, you will not be there for the end. Your knowledge of what is going on can only be superficial and relative." So even he thought the book would be confusing, and maybe that was his intention. In Burroughs-like manner, I would say this about Naked Lunch. On the surface, all you get is naked lunch, with no garnishing and no dessert. But it is enough. And at dinner time, you don't really remember what you had for lunch. But if you think about it, you will taste again the ingredients and understand what it was you ate. The first impression when reading Naked Lunch is that the book is about brutality, homosexuality, pedophilia, and drug use, all presented as dark comedy, but under the surface it is criticism of the contemporary world. The book is basically anti-establishment, which includes being anti-censorship, anti-political, and anti-control. You see, control can never be a means to any practical end. It can never be a means to anything but more control, like junk. The book also is a protest against capital punishment and at the same time a search for personal freedoms, freedom of expression, sexual freedom, freedom to use drugs, freedom to make decisions for oneself, and any kind of individual freedom. What Burroughs is doing is basically challenging the execution of the First Amendment of the US Constitution, and if I was to generalize, I would say that Naked Lunch is anti-society and pro-individual. The broken image of man moves in minute by minute and cell by cell. Poverty, hatred, war, police criminals, bureaucracy, insanity, all symptoms of the human virus. Burroughs also shows his profound knowledge of the drugs, their effect on the mind, long-term consequences on the body, and the understanding of the supply and demand as it applies to the drug trade. The junk merchant doesn't sell his product to the consumer. He sells the consumer to his product. He does not improve and simplify his merchandise. He degrades and simplifies his client. The book's plot seems to be one long dream, since in the end Lee wakes up in New York and he is the only one who has any kind of recollection of the transpired events. The first part of the book seems somewhat real, the road trip through the US up to the point where Lee and his wife Jane arrive in Mexico City, but from there it becomes one long drug-induced hallucination. There are some real elements from Burroughs' own travels, but they just serve as background to his delusional trip. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that it was in Mexico City that Burroughs killed his wife, and it created some kind of traumatic need for disconnection, before and after effect, but that's just my theory. Also in the book, Lee is constantly running away from people, places, and past events, probably, as in real life, Burroughs was running away from his past sins. But as with most people, he didn't realize he was running away from himself, and that's impossible to succeed at. The only thing one can do is stay and deal with oneself, which Burroughs did his best to avoid. Well, to his credit, he dealt with his demons through his writings and merited the death of his wife as inspiration for his literary career. To sum it up, Naked Lunch is unfiltered and raw, which might have influenced the title, and reads more like a comedy play than a novel. And I think it would be a great inspiration for a comic to do a stand-up act about his own drug addiction. I remember reading Tropic of Cancer, where Henry Miller writes, "This is not a book, but an insult, a kick in the pants, etc., etc., etc." I think something similar can be said about Naked Lunch. This is not a book, but an unfiltered and raw experience in reading, a crime against literature, presented as a bizarre and hilarious journey. Burroughs was willing to offend and test the limits of literary acceptance. Once I saw an interview with him where he says that writing is 50 years behind painting. So maybe his purpose or objective in writing Naked Lunch was to make literature more mature and contemporary. Anyway, the book is one large paradox, and the best way to read it might be to do it sporadically and impulsively, since that's how Burroughs probably wrote it, in the moments of drug-induced inspiration. There is a 1991 adaptation of the book with a rather linear plot, as opposed to the novel itself where the writer jumps back and forward, but the film gives a bit of visual reference to the reading. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback which I transform into a hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover I use grade A naturally tan hide I buy from Tenere in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First I designed the cover, and what I did here, I took this caricature painting of William Burroughs and made the cover with it. This is the back with the blurb, and inside front cover I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend the $100, but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel. And for every 100 donations, I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So, if you want one, don't snooze, or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here, and until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.